Trump, desperate tariffs, TikTok bans, a $36 trillion debt, trade wars, and political meltdowns. To most, these are just big, bold headlines for modern America. But to history, they sound like a countdown to a collapsing empire. Growing up like I did, I saw the American machine dominate the world on the silver screen, waging wars with a massive army, stockpiling the greatest amount of wealth ever witnessed, and the largest cultural exporter in the world. But now, the threads are unraveling. Trade wars with China, endless debt, fractured politics, and society losing faith in itself. So the question must be asked, is the United States about to collapse? Truth be told, I don't know, but I think there's someone who can help me answer this question. A genius Islamic scholar who is regarded by many as the greatest intellectual ever to have appeared in the Muslim world, dubbed the Father of Sociology and the pioneer of modern science of history. That's right, an Arab historian that existed 700 years ago is going to help me find out if the United States is going to collapse. His name is Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is the mastermind behind the cyclical theory of civilizations, a 5-stage life cycle describing how empires rise and fall. From before Ibn Khaldun with the Romans to centuries after his time with the Ottomans, all empires have accurately fit the description laid out in Ibn Khaldun's cyclical theory to deadly precision. But we're only interested in one empire, the mother of all empires. And today, I'm going to walk you through the 5 steps of this theory and prove to you that Ibn Khaldun details the rise and possible collapse of the leader of the West, the United States of America. Let's get to it. Before we find out whether or not you'll be able to drink Coca-Cola and eat Big Macs in the future, let's talk about Ibn Khaldun, the star of the show and my personal hero. So who is Ibn Khaldun?
I studied economics in college when I was young, and I learned there about a man named Ibn Khaldun.
A genius Islamic scholar from Tunis who had the best combination of genius, classical Islamic education, and noble lineage, and the most important ingredient, experience. And what an experience he had. He traveled from Spain to Egypt, observing and even participating in a dynastic Game of Thrones. His life is packed full of highs and lows. It will be too much to talk about in one video. So I want to concentrate on just one part, or just one book of his in particular. This book, the Muqaddimah. There is no book on the subject of history that is more influential than the Muqaddimah. From Arnold Toynbee to Mark Zuckerberg, all included in amongst their top reads. Before Ibn Khaldun and the Muqaddimah, no one had really taken a scientific approach to history. Up until his time, historians talked about history like moral tales where good triumphs over evil. They probably added a dragon or two in their books. Having high standards, this didn't sit well with Ibn Khaldun. He was not kind in his comments about these historians. Look at what he has to say. Historians, Quran commentators, and leading transmitters have committed frequent errors in the stories and events they reported. They accepted them in the plain transmitted form without regard for its value. They did not check them with the principles underlying such historical situations, nor did they compare them with similar material. Also, they did not probe with the yardstick of philosophy with the help of knowledge of the nature of things, or with the help of speculation and historical insight. Therefore, they strayed from the truth and found themselves lost in the desert of baseless assumptions and errors. Ouch. Ibn Khaldun wanted to fix this, so he came up with a light bulb idea. He took the subject of history, analytical reasoning and logic, empirical observation to fuse them together. Like Knafi, Ibn Khaldun had created something special. He created Ilm al-Umran, the science of civilizations. For this new science, he was crowned the Father of Sociology, as no one ever before him had thought of this revolutionary concept. But the Muqaddimah isn't just about society and human behavior. It's also about the rise and fall of empires, states and dynasties. During Ibn Khaldun's travel and political adventures, he saw Bedouin dynasties rise and fall all over North Africa. He concluded that the most powerful factor for the success of a dynasty to dominate is asabiyya. Ibn Khaldun famously developed this concept to properly define social solidarity. The most common form of asabiyya is a strong family blood bond. That's why dynasties married their children off to other dynasties to strengthen their power. But the most important part of the Muqaddimah is the 5-phase life cycle theory that describes the rise and fall of empires. So what does this life cycle look like? and what does it tell us about the US? Ibn Khaldun divided the life cycle of empires, states, and dynasties into 5 stages that generally last for 120 years or 3 to 4 generations. They go as follows. The first phase, the foundation. A group starts out with a strong Bedouin culture with an emphasis on asabiya or social cohesion. That means bonds of loyalty, sacrifice, cooperation, and unity are strong out of necessity to survive. Obedience and loyalty owed to strong leaders, tradition, and religion are crucial, and people don't think much about the size of the wallets. Second phase, personalization of power. Power is cultivated around one group or one individual as they defeat their rivals. Asabiya becomes a matter of reason rather than custom, and the military becomes organized. Phase 3, growth and expansion. After successive victories and unrivaled dominance, a new era of leisure and comfort has come, and the fruits are ripe for reaping in this phase. Fourth phase, stagnation. Expansion stops and growth hits a ceiling as the older generation dies off and the inexperienced replace them. They are complacent with their position on top. Ibn Khaldun says that this is the stage where the state reaches its natural borders. The fifth and final stage, decline. Distrust in authority, lack of public expenditure, the imitation of stronger rival states, and a record low in asabiya. This is the death signal of a collapsing state. The 5-stage life cycle for empires are not set in stone and don't necessarily ring true for all dynasties that come to power. These phases act as signs of age in a lifespan, not determined causes of death for an empire. So can this theory be applied to the United States of America? Let's see. America began as Europe's cash machine, lands worked by enslaved people and fought over by rival empires. By 1765, the colonialists had carved out their own identity. They'd built towns, mastered trade, and were battle-hardened from the 7 Years' War. Community bonds ran deep, a kind of Bedouin asabiya with group solidarity Ibn Khaldun described. All they lacked to enter the state-building phase was a spark to ignite that unity. And Britain provided it. After years of war drained its treasury, London imposed its first direct tax on the colonies, a fatal misstep for any empire, as Ibn Khaldun would warn. The colonialists grumbled, but the real outrage came in 1773 when Britain taxed their beloved tea and handed a monopoly to one company. The colonialists struck back with the Boston Tea Party, dumping 3 shipments into the harbour in open defiance. Taxation without representation became their rallying cry. They rejected the authority of a parliament 6,000 kilometres across the Pacific and declared in action, if not yet in words, their desire for freedom. Britain's response was heavy-handed. It shut Boston's port and stripped Massachusetts of self-rule. Outrage turned to rebellion, and the American Revolution erupted, thrusting the colonialists into the first phase of Ibn Khaldun's cycle of rising states, the foundation phase. In 1774, the Americans held the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. 2 years later, the Declaration of Independence severed the ties to Britain, and George Washington took the reins of the Revolutionary Army. Through freezing winters, disease, shortages, and despair, his soldiers held firm, driven by their asabiya, their rugged frontier spirit, and Washington's steady leadership. In 1783, they emerged victorious over British redcoats. The Founding Fathers then cemented this unity in law. In 1787, the Founding Fathers of America drew up a new constitution for the United States of America, which guaranteed civil liberties and rights. Asabiya was literally written into the constitution. This foundation phase, as Ibn Khaldun might describe it, began with the revolution and endured up until 1861. So what happened in 1861? The personalization of power. This stage begins with the literal bang, the American Civil War of 1861. The nation split into 2. North, the Union, versus South, the Confederacy, over slavery. The South fought to preserve its plantation system. The North sought to abolish slavery and extend civil rights. After 4 long bloody years, the Northern Union triumphed in 1865. Lincoln's 1863 Emancipation Proclamation freed enslaved people, but he paid with his life, assassinated by the Southern sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth. In victory, the Union consolidated power, crushing Confederate resistance with strict laws and central authority. Asabiya, the collective spirit for liberty, remained, now expanded to include formerly enslaved Americans. The Reconstruction era marked a shift from Ibn Khaldun's Badawa, rural tribal culture, toward Hadara, urbanized state-centered culture, where security and government took precedence. Over the following decades, America grew in territory, resources, and military strength, shielded by its geography and unchallenged abroad. This personalization of power phase, which began with the Civil War, carried the nation to the global stage, culminating in the 1940s, the decade that changed everything. The growth and expansion phase. World War II. the mother of all wars. It was the inflection point for the world, especially the US, and it launched them into the next phase. While Europe bled itself dry in global conflict, the United States back then didn't want any war, which is a shock to many of us today. Its economy was thriving and its military machine was well oiled. That changed in late 1941 when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. From 42 to 45, America became the decisive force behind Allied victory over Germany and Japan, culminating in the atomic bomb. A horror that silenced the world and announced a new era. The US is now the global superpower. From that moment, American foreign policy made one thing clear: the US was king. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, and the post-war boom transformed the nation into the America that we know today. Consumerism and luxury defined the new American identity, while the military ballooned into a force so vast that even the government struggled to measure it. Prosperity surged and the American dream was born. So if America's growth and expansion began in the 1940s, the question remains, when did it end? The stagnation phase. This stage starts with: after 9/11, America's trajectory shifted. The 2003 invasion of Iraq, built on lies, killed over 1 million Iraqis. In 2008, Wall Street greed crashed the global economy, destroying millions of lives without any repercussions.
My people have been in this game for 25 years, and they are losing their jobs, and these firms are going to go out of business, and he's nuts! They're nuts! They know nothing!
And in recent years, polarizing leaders fractured the nation into warring political tribes, culminating in the Capitol Hill attack in 2021. The loudest Khaldunian alarm of this era is the loss of Asabiyya, the social glue that once fueled America's rise. Early Americans fought for freedom and liberty, but the spirit has eroded. The civil rights movement of the 1960s exposed that equality for African Americans was far from reality. Wars in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan weren't about freedom or democracy. They were about profit, influence, and control. Watergate in 1972 and Snowden's NSA leaks in 2013 proved that the government was spying on its own people. Trust in leadership has hit rock bottom. Even the recent genocide in Gaza has rocked the American people into distrusting their government's leadership and foreign policy. Ibn Khaldun wrote that in stagnation, younger generations blame their elders. So it is no surprise we see trends like "OK Boomer" sound out today. Meanwhile, the American dream, excessive consumerism, and luxury can no longer be sustained by the middle class because of a rising cost of living while the rich prosper. The signs of stagnation are here and they linger. So, is America entering its fifth phase, the decline, or is it already in it? We can't say for sure. There are signs of decline. Social cohesion is fracturing. Trust in government decision-making is at an all-time low, including right and left. More money is spent on debt than the actual military, and it's only growing bigger. The rise of China as a superpower now means that there is a rival ready to take America's throne. And lastly, the Asabiyya of liberty, equal rights, and unity that once grouped the nation is now at a teetering point. Maybe it's not so far-fetched to say that America might already be in decline. But let's say the US is on the verge of collapse. What does this mean for the rest of the world? If America truly falters, the consequences will be global. 170,000 US troops are stationed across 159 countries. Its $36.2 trillion economy makes up 19% of global trade, and the US dollar underpins the world's financial system. The collapse of such a power rarely ends peacefully. History suggests it ends in war. Just think about that. Ibn Khaldun changed history and changed studying history forever. Historians and Muslim atlas included owes a debt to Ibn Khaldun's work in the Muqaddimah. Not just history, but contributions towards economics, which is another Muslim atlas video in and of itself. So there you go. Ibn Khaldun, the Tunisian Islamic scholar born in the 14th century, was able to explain the rise and maybe predict the fall of a 21st century state. May Allah have mercy on Ibn Khaldun and reward him for his contribution to humanity.